Is it trolling? Okay.
It's rolling.
Hey everybody, this is Adventure Vin. Haven't been on the KLR for a long time, but earlier, a couple of months ago, I did a video where I went on a short Route 66 trip with two other KLR buddies, Rick and Hector. Hector is actually holding the camera right now, but I think this is very important. It's not going to be a funny video. It's going to be more informational because it's been very frustrating for me. So if you look over to this side, so they got Gen 2 KLRs. And the Gen 2 KLRs have blade fuses, where the Gen 1 has glass fuses, and they're not easy to find, and it's not really modernized, and that's probably one of the bigger, one of the technological leaps between the KLR Gen 1 and Gen 2. So when I was doing my Route 66 trip, I often told you guys that I had to monitor my RPMs and my speed to keep from overheating. Well, I'm not an experienced motorcycle rider, so I was just doing what I could to get this trip done. And on this trip today, what we decided to do, Hector and I are from the Riverside area, Southern California, and Rick is coming in from Big Bear. We were going to go to 29 Palms National Park. So while we're going out there, I was having some overheating issues once again. And as Hector was following me in his KLR, he wasn't having near the issues at all. So we got to 29 Palms, we turned, hung out there, came back up to come up to Big Bear, and I was struggling, and I was getting frustrated. We had to pull over halfway up, and I was pegged in the red, where their two Gen 2s were cruising along fine. So what we ended up doing is troubleshooting it, and they noticed, Rick and Hector noticed that when I was pegged on the red, Rick looked in and saw that my fan, which is right here on the radiator, my fan was not moving at all. It was pegged in the red, way over, and the fan was not moving at all. So we said, hey, when we get up to Rick's house, we're going to troubleshoot it. Maybe the fan is seized. Maybe there's a loose wire, a loose ground, or maybe even a fuse issue. Well, I knew on the Gen 1 that the only fuses I ever found on the Gen 1 were in this area. Now, it looks like a mess, but what you see here, I think, if I remember right, it would have been like the ignition fuse and the headlight fuse, which are also inline glass fuses. These are the only ones I ever found. These other blade fuse assemblies you see are some of the accessories that I had added. So the blade fuse is here on the Gen 1, and that's just a spare fuse, what you see right there. There's a spare fuse in the housing, so you would slide this down.
It's got a spare fuse.
You slide this down, and there's where your inline fuses are at. Once again, ignition. And I'm not much of a mechanic, not much of an electrician, but Hector and Rick were determined on finding the inline fuse for the fan. So what we ended up doing was disassembling the fairings, and I've talked to you guys about my protectors, but that's not what we're talking about today. We took apart the fairings, and right away Rick and Hector found this inline fuse system, and they opened it up, and a spare was sitting in 10 amp, right?
Mm-hmm.
10 amp. So it was a 10 amp fuse, and there was a spare sitting here, which is now in here, and they took it out right away, and they saw where the fuse had actually broke. Correct? So the fuse had actually broke, so they swapped that out. Boom, fans working fine. One thing we'll probably do in the future is replace this with the blade style housing. So we'll run a blade style fuse, and possibly recommend go up from the 10 amp, which is stock glass, to either a 12 or a 15 amp blade once this is all done. In the meanwhile, I can still get a glass 12 or 15, which I probably will do to keep the fan going. One other way we're going to remedy my overheating issues, as Rick recommended, is that, so I've been putting coolant in, I've been putting some other additives in. So the recommendation now is that when I get home, we're about half hour, 45 minutes away, is drain all the fluid that was in there, because it's been, the chemical makeup's probably been compromised, and I don't want to say corroded, but
It's cooked.
It's cooked, yeah. He said you probably cooked all the fluid in there that you had putting in there. So drain it, get all the fluids out. Now that the fan's working, put all the appropriate fluid, recommended fluid types and levels back in. But I'm also still going to do the thermobob, which is often a big topic with the KLR world. When I do the thermobob, we'll probably come back up here, and I'm going to do the thermobob simultaneously with doing the doohickey. I have all the parts, I have all the tools ready to go to do that. I just don't have I don't have a lot of the mechanical technology or ingenuity, so I'm going to probably lean on Hector and Rick to help me out with that. But it's been very frustrating since I've owned the bike, and if you followed me along on my Route 66 trip almost exactly a year ago, I had to pull over. I got stuck in Albuquerque, New Mexico, going out and coming back. It might have been the altitude or just the heat of Albuquerque, but both times I was done in Albuquerque. I overheated in Chicago, and then that one time, if you saw it, where I got the bloody nose at Hoover Dam, the bike was totally, it was lurching. It was so hot, it was like losing power. It would lurch and lurch and lurch, and I had to get it out, get it into the shade. So mechanically, we got the fan working. Technological wise, we're going to upgrade what you see here on the fuse. It was zip tied to the side here. So we're going to not only upgrade the fuse amperage, but we're also going to upgrade the style into a blade and do the thermal bob and change the fluids. Hopefully with those remedies, as long as I keep on top of everything, and if I start overheating, I can recheck the fuse. But once that's all done, I shouldn't have any issues. I should be able to keep up with two other kids. They're all 650s. It's just that their fuses and their fans are working, and I believe, Rick, you did the thermal bob, right?
I did.
So Rick did the thermal bob. He said it wasn't that daunting of a task. Once again, you know what kills me is that there is so much YouTube stuff out there for the thermal bob and for the Gen 2s, and I've searched and I've searched and I've searched. But for the fan blade and for the fan rotation and where that fuse is located, I would have never ever found this had it not been for Rick and Hector today. So thanks a lot for finding that. I was about ready to give up, thinking I just buy a new bike, which would have been sitting over there. No,
That one.
So I'm very, very ecstatic and very happy. I believe this is going to be, and it's going to be a good trial with the new fuse to see from here all the way to Riverside, because I guarantee you, it would have pegged. It would have went way past the middle, and I would have overheated sometime. And on the way from 29 Palms up here, I was running right near the red. I was running there for the most part, climbing these hills. So we'll be able to see the difference here. I'll flush the fluids. You know what I might do? Actually, I might wait till we do the thermal bob to flush the fluids, so I'm not wasting money on coolant. So, but anyways, thanks for checking this out. It was just, I think this is one of the most empowering things about YouTube is when other viewers have some of these issues, and you can actually physically look, because there's just not a lot out there in the Gen 1. It was been trial and error for me. So now y'all guys know where fuses are at. Once again, the Gen 1 is all glass fuses, stock-wise. The only blade fuses that are in there are the ones that I added for some of the accessories I've added on. But as Rick mentioned, in time I'm probably going to upgrade all the inline fuses to blade fuses, so I'll have to carry one set. And they're more prevalent if you're on the road and you're going to Pep Boys, AutoZone, whatnot. Just walking with the blade fuse, and you're probably going to be easier. And fellow motorcyclists will probably have a blade fuse. So get out of your glass fuses. All right, thanks a lot. When I get home sometime this week, I want to do something on apparel, on the minimal stuff that I use when I ride. It was a hot day, and I will put a plug in real quick because I want to get into the boots. But people always ask me about these TCX. These TCX ran me, I think, either close to $300 or $400. I love them. It was a hot day today. I do only wear ankle-length socks, but these are really doing a service. Hot weather, cold weather. It's Gore-Tex line, guaranteed for life. So, but I'm going to go in depth on that later. Thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, and in this beautiful weather, if you're in Southern California or any place else in the United States, get out there and ride. Have a great day, YouTube. Thanks. Hey, I'm just gonna add on to this video really quick because actually Rick found an inline fuse box, so we actually have a blade fuse. I'm gonna show you that in a second. But what's important to know, Gen 1, this is gonna be titled Gen 1, so I can't talk on the Gen 2, but the Gen 1 has these fairings, and what Rick showed me was, so it has like this grid pattern. And so we said, hey, let's pop these out. And if you can see it, they pop out fairly easy. It's nothing. I mean, you can pop them out, pop them in, pop them out all day long. If you like the way that looks, if you don't like the way that looks, you can pop them out. So we took it out. Now here's where it becomes really, really functional for that. Not only do we take it out, it's going to encourage and allow more airflow to and from. But here's the kicker right here on both sides is that on the side where that fuse is, so they found an inline. So check this out. So if this fuse blows again, Rick found one in his garage, and Rick and Hector lined it all up and connected it. So right now, where I showed you earlier in the video, this was a glass fuse. It's now an inline blade fuse with we went up to 15 amp, which Rick was recommending. From a 10, only go up to 12 to 15 amps. To exceed that, the path of the current will sooner melt down wires before the fuse blows. So that current's going to look for the path of least resistance, and at 20, it's going to be your wires, not the fuse or the breaker. So right now, I went as high as 15, which is going to allow that motor to run past what the 10 was allowing before it cut it out. So, but the cool thing about it, the access is, so we got everything back together pretty much, but now we went, number one, we found where the fuse was. Number two, we swapped it out with the blade fuse with an inline blade fuse holder. We upgraded it from a 10 to a 15, and we popped out that little knockout piece. So now if it happens in the future, I don't have to, if I didn't knock that out, I would have to take the bar back down, manipulate this, unscrew this, pop this out. Now, no tools needed at all. I just hold this up, pop it out, replace the fuse, and I'm back on the road. So I will probably have a 10, a 12, and a 15 with me from now on. Now, if you come around the other side, we're about ready to button this side up, and Hector and Rick also pointed this out to me. So we popped out the other side, as you saw how easy it is. So now we popped out this side. Here's the fan, and now when this goes over, not only does it give it a really good visual where the fan is, you can see the fan more clearer, but it also is going to provide intake and exhaust. So when airflow is coming in and out of that area, you may not think that little grid pattern thing, more than likely the design there is to probably protect it. If I was doing a lot of off-roading, debris and stuff, branches flying into the fan, I'm not that kind of rider, as you guys know from my YouTube videos. I have no plans on these tires ever leaving the ground, and the most I've ever done was on packed dirt. Never went bushwhacking. I don't think there's going to be an environment where a debris or anything is going to flow in. I believe I'm going to get the benefit from the intake and the exhaust from not having that grid on there, and the visual of making sure my fan blade's running. And we tested it all out. So we ran it up high, it kicked on, and then it was a good idea that Rick said, hey, don't turn it off at the ignition, turn it off at the kill switch. So when you did that, I turned it off at the kill switch, the temperature was still kind of cruising very high, and the fan was still rotating to cool down that engine. So I wish I would have had known this or done this before my other long trips, but you learn as you go along. Thank God I ran into these two guys. Otherwise, I'd be pulling over every hour when I'm riding. So I hope to have more encouraging YouTube videos, especially on the KLR. This is just a quick add-on to show you guys the completeness of how we're going to get that cooling system down. We're going to come back up in a couple of weeks, do the thermal bob and the the thermal bob and the doohickey, and we'll probably have some YouTube video on that also. There's a lot of YouTube video on that already. Rick did his on his Gen 2. We're going to do it on my Gen 1, and I feel like I have a new bike already. I'm totally looking forward to the ride home. A little thing like that can make a huge difference in your motivation. Once again, thanks again for tuning in. Like, subscribe, get out there on your bikes and ride. And if you're ever in Southern California, let me know, and especially if you're a KLR rider, we'll hook up. Take care, YouTube.